A particularly contentious aspect of the Morgellons debate is its overlap with chronic Lyme disease. Some practitioners who treat Lyme disease believe that Morgellons is a co-infection or a secondary effect caused by persistent bacteria in the body. According to this theory, the fibers seen in Morgellons are produced by the body itself in response to infection or inflammation. Others speculate that an immune system imbalance or environmental exposure could trigger the symptoms. While this view has not been widely accepted by mainstream medicine, it continues to drive research and treatment approaches in some alternative and integrative health communities. There is also a sociological dimension to the Morgellon phenomenon. The internet played a critical role in shaping how people understand and identify their symptoms. Online forums and support groups have provided validation and solidarity for sufferers, but they have also contributed to the rapid spread of self-diagnosis. This dynamic has made it difficult for physicians to distinguish between psychogenic illness. Yes. This dynamic has made it difficult for physicians to distinguish between psychogenic illness, where symptoms arise from psychological origins, or a potential new disease that is simply not yet well understood. In some cases, patients have brought extensive documentation to their doctors, including photographs, videos, and even physical samples of the fibers. When their concerns are dismissed, frustration and distrust can grow, leading patients to seek care outside conventional systems. Another layer of controversy surrounds the suggestion that Morgellons may be linked to exposure to unknown environmental agents, nanomaterials, or bioengineering substances. These ideas often fall into the realm of speculation. These ideas often fall into the realm of speculation and are frequently dismissed by scientists as unproven or conspiratorial. Nevertheless, the intensity of belief among some patients has led to persistent questions about whether environmental toxins, industrial pollution, or even deliberate human intervention could play a role. These theories have not been confirmed, but they illustrate the deep anxiety and uncertainty that many sufferers experience when searching for answers. The challenge of Morgellons lies in its intersection of multiple disciplines. It touches dermatology, psychiatry, infectious disease, immunology, and even neurology. The lack of definitive biomarker or tests makes diagnosis difficult, and the absence of consensus on its cause or treatment creates frustration from both patients and healthcare providers. Some physicians treat the condition symptomatically, focusing on skin care, antibiotics, antidepressants, or antipsychotic medications, depending on the individual case. Others reject the diagnosis entirely, viewing it as an internet-driven delusion. Meanwhile, a smaller number of doctors have developed protocols based on the idea of chronic infection using long-term antibiotics and herbal supplements, though this approach remains controversial and is often criticized for lacking scientific validation. For the patient's or from the patient's perspective, Morgellons can be an isolated and traumatic experience. Many report being dismissed, misdiagnosed, or treated with skepticism by the medical system. Others face ridicule from friends, family, or online commentators who do not believe their condition is real. The social stigma compounds the physical and psychological burden of the illness. For those who believe they are afflicted, the suffering is undeniably real, even if the underlying mechanisms is still in question. The God helmet is a controversial and fascinating device developed to explore the relationship between brain activity and religious or mystical experiences. Created by Canadian neuroscientist Michael Persinger and his colleague Stanley Coren in the late 20th century, the device was designed to stimulate specified areas of the brain using weak magnetic fields. Persinger claimed that this stimulation, particularly when applied to the temporal lobes, could induce altered states of consciousness, including the sensation of a presence, profound spiritual awe, and even out-of-body experiences. The name God helmet came from media portrayals of the device, reflecting its association with experiences that users described as religious or transcendent. The helmet itself was not a complex or high-powered piece of equipment. It was essentially a modified motorcycle helmet outfitted with magnetic coils and connected to a computer that generated low-intensity electromagnetic signals. These signals were carefully patterned to mimic the natural activity of the brain's own electrical processes. Persinger believed that certain types of brainwave stimulation could unlock latent physiological capacities, producing sensations that people throughout history have interpreted as contact with supernatural beings or divine forces. Persinger's experiment involved hundreds of volunteers who wore the helmet in a quiet, darkened room while their responses were monitored. Many participants reported a strong sense that someone or something was in the room with them. even though they were alone. Some described a benevolent presence, others sensed something ominous. A few reported visions or deep emotional insights. Persinger interpreted these results as evidence that spiritual and religious experiences could be triggered artificially by manipulating the brain's electromagnetic environment. According to Persinger, the temporal lobes of the brain are especially involved in processing emotion, memory, and self-awareness. He hypothesized that under certain conditions, such as stress, sensory deprivation, or electromagnetic stimulation, these areas could produce sensations of another intelligence or presence. He believed that throughout human history, people experiencing natural or accidental stimulation of the temporal lobes may have interpreted the resulting sensation as visitations from gods, spirits, or the metaphysical or other metaphysical beings. The God helmet was, in his view, a tool to demonstrate that these experiences were rooted in biology rather than external realities. The response to the God helmet within the scientific community was deeply divided. Some researchers found Persinger's work intriguing and worthy of further study, especially in the context of neurotheology, the field that explores the neural basis of religious experience. Others criticized his methodology, questioning the consistency of his results or challenging the interpretation of his findings. One of the main criticisms was the difficulty in replicating the effects in other laboratories. Some experiments conducted by independent researchers failed to produce the same intensity of experiences reported in Persinger's studies, leading to speculation about whether the device truly worked as claimed or whether the effects were largely due to suggestion, expectation, or placebo. Nonetheless, the idea that religious or spiritual states could be neurologically induced was revolutionary in its implications. If divine experience could be artificially generated by stimulating the brain, it raised profound questions about the origins of belief, the authenticity of mystical encounters, and the nature of consciousness itself.